Hey, Suzanne. Hello.
Hello, Eric.
Oh, yay, my audio. Okay, my audio works. It was so sad the other day. I,
Yeah,
I tried I tried to download the Teams actual application, and I think it broke my audio. Like I've been using the web client for a long time because people said that there were issues with the Teams client for M1 or for Apple Silicon. And yesterday I downloaded it, and then that was the first meeting I took on it, and my audio didn't work.
yeah. I have also like learned my lesson. The first time trying to set up, like when you have a new setup, it's like 50% chance that's gonna break.
Yeah. You change something and it's not gonna work.
Wait,
Oh, so I have to pull up the agenda. I have real things today to
hey,
add.
we have
I mean,
many things to discuss. I adjusted a little bit so like mine goes last because um
my little bit is like a mixed bag. It's good and it's bad.
my Zoom is having issues again.
Uh-oh.
If I quit now, what will happen?
The meeting will explode. It
Okay,
will kick me out. Discussion over alphabet.
in the lobby, and I'll try to let him in. Or I'll try to make you the host. Let me see. Okay, I might start the meeting again because my Zoom is completely
Is dead. Okay.
okay, and I don't know how to. Okay, I'm gonna kill the process.
Okay.
Close all windows. Okay. I can't even
You can't kill it.
oh wait. There is always task manager. Hang on.
There's always unplugging your computer from the wall.
Yeah,
You go scorched earth.
it doesn't even bring up the task manager.
Oh gosh. Yeah, here I was thinking that I'll just get to this alpha 3 thing, and it'll be
yeah, I found the end task button. I don't know what will happen, but I'll see. 1, 2, 3,
okay.
task.
Well, welcome back.
Hi.
All right, you're in.
Yep, and it still does not work.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, is Akash here? I'm gonna ping him on Teams and ask him to start the meeting.
I was gonna say I can't see who's like in the lobby waiting to come in.
Yeah, it's because if I made you the host, then that'll work.
Then I can see.
Yeah, let me message Akash on my device.
I was gonna say, if you want to promote me, if you're just trying to admit people, I can try.
Yeah, I can't get to the chat window or participant list, so I'm gonna message Akash. Hi, Akash. Would you be able to start the meeting as host? My Zoom is crashing.
My Zoom is dead.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to end process and then let him join.
Okay.
Task manager.
Sorry, everyone. Looks like there's some technical difficulties. Yeah, I guess this is why we don't use Zoom, but okay.
I'm sure I've seen my share of Teams problems.
I don't know. Teams, Teams has never acted up for me ever. So
Yeah, never an issue. Let me see if Susan can join this now.
Yeah, maybe she can dial in from a phone or something, if that helps. Hello. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about the delay.
No problem.
I'm joined
worries.
through the phone right now. So I can't share screen while I'm restarting my computer to join again. Akash, would you like to share screen? And maybe we can start with the agenda, the
Sure.
discussion items. We do have a few of them on the list.
Yep. Let me get that. 1 second. All right. I guess we can start with, do we have any open PRs?
I think there's Dependabot.
My computers.
Yeah, we got some Dependabot things.
Okay. All right. So we got the Orsco RC3 released. Should be good to merge, but I think we should probably check and confirm it doesn't break anything. I don't think it should, but yeah, I can take that. I'll check and then merge this in.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a delta. I was just looking at the RC3. Like they do have some breaking changes, but I don't know if they will directly impact us. But they do with some. So probably good to just smoke test.
Yep. Yeah, I'll do that. Should be good though. Second one, the Docker CLI one. I think we can just merge this one in. I think we decided for every release we'll do a general test of all the use cases. So, and then this last one is also good to go. Yeah. Any objections, or I'll just merge these in?
You go for it. I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay.
We want to move on to the next item.
Yeah.
Alpha 3 verify. I mean, you can go ahead and just keep doing that if you want, but I think we can
Sure.
start talking.
Yeah, I added a link to the issue, but I put a comment in the GitHub issue, but the I guess the quick summary is the new verifier class or struct that they have in Alpha 3 for Notation Go is a significant deviation from the way that the current one works. And the internals look quite similar to our Ratify core executor loop. And, so they have their own repository now, and it doesn't really, the interface for their repository doesn't really line up with ours. And also internally, they are searching the registry directly for all notary signatures that are attached to the provided artifact URI. So they're doing what we're trying to do in our executor loop. So I was looking at the implementation internally for the pieces that happen after they resolve all of these artifacts, and those do what the previous implementation does with the addition of the trust policy. So to me, that's like really what we want, is we want like the prior implementation where we are going to provide you the signature and we just want to use the new trust policy stuff, but all of that is private scoped, it's module scoped to their verifier. So we aren't able to use that functionality directly. So I would hope, I'm hoping that we can talk to the notation maintainers and see if we can get, I walked the function calls for some of those like verifier like member functions, and some of them don't even reference anything from the verifier struct. So they could just be static helper functions and moved out. And then some of them do reference things that are verifier member variables, but the functions could be refactored such that those could be parameters instead of directly accessing that information from the verifier. So I would hope that we could talk to them and see if we could get some of that functionality pushed into Notation Core Go so that we could use it more directly rather than having to rely on the new verifier implementation that they've added. But that's where we're at, is if we wanted to use it as is, it's going to require a decent amount of us shimming our implementation or our model so that it will glue in, or so that we can glue in their new verifier implementation. So I don't know if David, if you
I mean, I can be an advocate there. I mean, I'm pretty heavily involved in the notation stuff. But what I would need though is what your desired case is filed as an issue. I do know that Notation Core Go, I think they're really trying to have that as a only generally being used by the Notation Go kind of thing. And so I think if you're trying to get changes there, I guess you just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense, and obviously we're in alpha stages there. So now would be a really good time if something's going to make your life a lot easier to propose it, and then we can see what the feedback is from the group.
Got it. Yeah. So I can file an issue with them, and I'll link it here just to see if we can move some of that around. And it would be good to get the input from them just to make sure that that it's acceptable to increase the public API surface that way. Because that will come with increased cost, or
Yeah, no, my thinking is a Notation Go should be a library that can be consumed by not just Ratify, but by others who want to build whatever verification chain or flow that they want. So if those APIs are not open enough, then we need to kind of give them a use case as to make it happen. I think opening an issue on Notation to kind of like, or a discussion and tagging David and Shue would be the next step, because they pretty much own most of the library surface area.
Okay.
And to kind of reiterate, I kind of like typed in chat, Notation Core Go is meant mostly only for crypto. They want to keep the surface area of Notation Core Go very, very small, like just crypto primitives, like algorithms and anything that talks to crypto libraries. All the registry stuff, the coordination between the registry and all that will be in Notation Go, which is more like a higher order thing, and the Notation CLI is just a shim on top of Notation Go. So there'll be a lot of helpers that maybe we don't use, but if you're not getting the primitives that we need for Ratify, we need to open those up.
Yeah. It sort of went from like we have the just the core functionality in the verifier to all the way to like batteries included.
Yeah.
The class that does everything. It's like, all right, okay, see if we can land in the middle somewhere.
Yeah. Now, if you want APIs exposed, let's open an issue, because I think Ratify is just one consumer, and we should think about it like Ratify is a major consumer for Notation, and let's open up the APIs as needed.
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'll make an issue and ask some questions, tag some people. I'll post a link in our issue.
Yeah, I would just post it in the Notation Go library, or in that repo. Post the issue there.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else for Notation Alpha 3? Okay.
That's it for now.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I can talk a little bit about some of the OCI index exploration that I've been doing. So I've been writing a design/exploration doc explaining the issue and then some of the avenues we can go with. But to start, I'll just summarize the problem. So right now, when Ratify gets a subject reference that actually maps to like an OCI index, Ratify is not aware of the index as being a special type of artifact. In user scenarios, they might want to resolve to a specific manifest based off of the platform, and then pull the artifacts associated with that platform and do the verification with that resolved descriptor. So there's two challenges. There are two main questions with that. So how should Ratify treat an OCI index when it comes across it? And then the second is that if there is an OCI index and we want to special case that, how will Ratify choose which of the platform-specific manifests to use in the resolution process? And that involves understanding what the host OS and architecture should be. So the first major question is, well, how do we treat the OCI index? So we could either ignore it, or we can basically resolve to the index and then specifically choose one of the manifests, and then only do the verification on the resolved manifest, or we can do it on both. So the first item, I'm leaning towards us adding functionality so that we grab the index, do the same verification flow with the index just to see if they add signatures to the index itself. And then we go a step further and also resolve to the specific manifest and do the corresponding behavior there as well. So if we go down that route, that involves changing a little bit of how the refer store resolves the subject descriptor. So right now, when you pass in a subject reference, the refer store returns back a single descriptor that it matches with and then does the whole verification flow with. I'm proposing that instead of returning a single manifest, a single descriptor for that manifest, we return kind of a list of descriptors. So the index as well as the manifest that it resolves to. And under the hood, we would be using the OS now supports the multi-platform selection. So we've provided the hint for the OS and the architecture, and then it would return the corresponding manifest descriptor that matches for that too. So we would return both descriptors, and then we would do the whole verification process on 2 different manifests this time too. So that's the first item. Anyone have any questions or concerns or ideas?
I had a question. So if we have, so somebody has a registry and they have multi-arc images in it, and somebody has a cluster where only, they only have one architecture that's used in the cluster. So they could, in that scenario, the cluster user can get sunk if, some architecture they don't use doesn't have any relevant artifacts or doesn't have, is not signed, etc. So that would be a possibility, right?
So you're saying that in the OCI index, there could be multiple manifests, but there could be other manifests that we're not concerned with that don't have the corresponding artifacts, then we would go down the rabbit hole of verifying those. Is that what
so I was just asking if with that approach, if a cluster only has one architecture and so they only care about one image, but there's more than one architecture in the registry, and we go and verify them all, and then
so no, it wouldn't. I think we would avert that problem because we would only return back the descriptor of the index as well as the descriptor of the matching manifest that's going to be deployed in the cluster. So the second part to it is, how do we determine what is that manifest? Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. And I guess it sort of leads into my other question, which would be like in a cluster where there's like multi-architectures, like multiple node pools, and maybe you have a tag or an annotation that a pod could get deployed to either, and the scheduler gets to decide.
Yes, yeah. So that's where like the second question, which is how do you actually determine which one? That's where it gets pretty tricky, because at that point of when the admission request comes in to deploy the pod, the scheduler hasn't kicked in yet, so it hasn't scheduled a particular node, so we can't extract the OS and ARC from there. So we would have to kind of use the same information that the scheduler is using to determine, but further up in the process to actually determine what manifest to choose. So one of the solutions it's kind of a best effort solution in my opinion is the way users usually, if they have multiple node pools with different architectures or different OSs, they use node selectors to kind of specify using a default Kubernetes tag like kubernetes.io/arc or OS. So we could, when we have in the rego itself, we have access to the entire pod spec. We could come up with certain policy or extraction function to basically see, hey, do those tags exist? And then we know that, okay, this is the host OS and architecture, and we can get that downstream to Ratify by introducing a new contract in the form of a serialized JSON string that we use to pass the reference, but instead we use to pass more than the reference as well as the host and the OS. So something kind of like this, but serialized. What you had talked about earlier, Eric, but that would be one way to get around it. You pass in that information and have the rego extrapolate the extra fields. And if we don't have that information in the rego, then we default to whatever the pods, host OS and ARC that you can determine using the Go properties to words. So, yeah, Sajay, you had a question?
I wanted to propose another option here, which is Ratify will only check the signature of the root manifest or the index itself. The reason why I'm proposing that is the index. If you sign the index, you're indirectly saying that any content within that index is also valid. So if the deployment is based on the root manifest, then you are kind of authorizing every other image that belongs to it. And
Yep.
the reason why that is simple is because at least the workflow will become clear. My goal is to kind of have a convention that this is what the solution looks like for multi-arc images. It doesn't have to be, because the runtimes do weird things, right?
Mhm.
So if there are multiple node pools deploying it in different architectures, you don't want to kind of like have to validate each one. And the problem is discovery will become more and more challenging. So it's more convention based, where we say for multi-arc manifests, you do need to put the signature on the root manifest itself. I mean, this is just another proposal, just to kind of like seal it and say this is the path that we're taking forward more than anything else. Otherwise, you have to invest into a lot of these things, right? Which
Yes.
are I feel like it's fragile over time, and we'll have to test this, manage it, and whatnot. And there is no clear indication at deployment time at what is the architecture that will finally get deployed as well. So anyway, that's what I wanted to kind of propose. If that's straightforward and everybody agrees to that, or we kind of like open it up as this is what we're proposing Ratify to do, and anybody who comes and asks about multi-arc, this is what is expected that you do.
I think that would be the best, honestly, because going down this rabbit hole of, okay, now we got to somehow figure out what if they use node affinities, or what if they use taints and tolerations, and everyone has their own custom way of doing it, and we are not going to be able to have a full grab all way of understanding what the host OS and ARC is. So yeah, that would be the best if we just stuck with the index, and
I think
that's the expectation. So.
I think David and I both, we kind of like didn't have permissions for the doc, by the way, the link that you shared.
Oh, let me share that.
Wait.
Signed in users is fair per right.
Yeah, actually, good point. We don't want Zoom bombing 2.0. I'll just post it in here. Okay. While I get this done, is there any other questions, or anyone have any other approach?
I think I wanted to just get David's opinion on that. Is that okay to start with? Because I don't think any other solution would be reasonably achievable in the next 6 months or even longer.
Yeah, I'd rather stick to the more straightforward use case, and then let other folks potentially come in and say, no, I have to have this, and then prioritize it. I mean, right now we're not handling it at all. So not handling right where we're at right now is really not good. But I think if we at least get the index covered, then I think we'll have at least a reasonable basis covered. But yeah, so yeah, I'm aligned with, I think, what you're proposing, Sajay, for now. We can, so we can come back later, but again, you get a rabbit hole, you get a lot of other things that come up when you start to go beyond that, right?
Yeah, I think it's more like cost versus benefit at this point in time.
Yeah.
And Akash has a bunch of things that he's actually on, so just want to make sure we don't kind of like, this is the most important thing to solve at this point in time. But I do acknowledge that we need to solve it, maybe, but if somebody asks, we can go down this path.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I think we don't have to do much. If we just go down this route, we need to update our documentation to make it clear that this is what the behavior is and what's expected.
Have you validated this?
Sorry?
Have you validated with a signature on a...
I have not. So that's okay. The next step. I need to validate that. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I don't have anything else on this. Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about the next part?
Yeah, I just want to go through the workaround for the parameters that we need for different verifiers. It might be easier for me to share screen.
Yep, sure.
So-
Let me stop and then make you host.
And I hope it doesn't crash this time. And I see Jimmy is back from vacation. Just hello, Jimmy. In the past few weeks, I've been working on implementing the store and verifier CRDs. So I'm just getting started with prototyping. So today I'm just sharing some progress and reviewing, like I'm hoping to get the spec reviewed. So let me share screen. Just gonna share my VS Code window. Can you see my screen right now, Akash?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm getting started with the verifier spec structure. Yesterday, or in an offline discussion, I was showing that if we had what we wanted, it's a map of objects, and the controller gen in the Cube Builder project had a limitation that it didn't recognize the interface. So I found a workaround online, actually in one of the discussion in the Cube Builder project, that someone pointed out we can use runtime raw extensions. So it's from the API machinery package. Eric, are you familiar with this object?
Not the raw extension now.
I tried it out a little bit. It seems it has two properties. One is the raw bytes, and the other one is the object. And the thread seemed to suggest that we will be able to use the raw string. So I did some experimentation. So right here, we have the verifier spec with the common properties name and artifact type. And in the parameters, I am printing out the object as a string here. And I've defined some sample objects here. So this one is a sample notary one. This one is the SBOM verifier. And lastly, the license checker. So under parameters, they all have their different properties. And I think I'm gonna run this. And I think I'm getting the result as expected. So we can serialize this string and go through the key and the value to create the verifiers we need. Just giving it a minute to compile. So I already have created these CRDs in my cluster. So on the startup, the reconciler is getting called for each object. So like I'm getting the MIT license, I'm getting the notary key vault object that I defined, and the nested reference for the SBOM. So I think it looks good. Is there any concerns using this mechanism?
So the caveat here is that with the controller gen, it generates the OpenAPI schema for the YAML, right? That's what you get. If you provide the actual interface, like not an empty interface, when you do controller gen, it comes up with here's what I found. Siri, calm down. for controller gen, you were saying you had an issue with the empty interface. What was the issue? It couldn't generate sample YAML, or it couldn't generate
It was, I think the error message was invalid type. It didn't really say which step that it was having trouble with. And I believed it did generate the sample YAML.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if when we provide that empty interface, if you provide the actual struct, do you get anything for free? Like, do you get input validation, for example? Like, they're going to make sure that it unmarshals to the object that you defined when somebody, provides this YAML. And if not, do we now have to do that for each verifier because we're not telling KubeBuilder what it's supposed to look like?
Yeah. I think we'll have to implement the validators for each verifier.
Okay. And yeah, that some amount of that will be nice, because there's probably some additional validations that we can do, like for the notary verifier. It'd be good to validate that if somebody like just straight up provides a certificate in here, that we can, that we can unpack the PEM into an X509 Go certificate. And if they provide a key vault reference, we can validate that, we're able to access that before we say, okay, it's in. So some amount of that validation is nice to be able to do, because we can kick things back before it becomes a runtime.
Yeah.
Like a validation time issue. I was just curious what we miss out on if we are not providing KubeBuilder the explicit type. And if it's nothing, or if it's not a lot, then whatever.
Yeah, even if it did get it for free, it'll depend on us knowing all the exact input and telling it what type it is.
Right.
Or we can just do it at runtime and say, oh, if you're initializing a notary verifier, make sure you have ABC.
Right. Yeah. So in this case, when we say name here, so our requirement is that the name corresponds to a plugin that you, so like the name is the pivot. Name must correspond to a verifier that you have compiled and that's in the container.
Yes. So I was looking at how we create the verifiers today. So we have a factory layer, and I believe it's based on, so in our configuration file, we have I've taken these from our configuration file. So we have the name and the artifact type, and the factory method would see if this is a built-in plugin. If it is, I think it calls, like it goes like a built-in plugin path, or else it'll create a new custom verifier. So I'm hoping just to integrate with that logic and just follow the same pattern.
Yeah, that should work. Like, we could take this name, and when you go do the factory, we could at least check if an executable with this name exists where we're expecting it. So you'd be able to tell. I mean, we could even glob that directory, and we could say, oh, here are all the available options if there's an issue.
Yeah, I think in the configuration file, or at least in the code, I'm seeing we have another property called plugin path, plugin directory.
Yeah.
Which isn't in our configuration file today, but I see in Lee's proposal, I think he proposed to add a address. I think that's to future-proof that the gRPC communication, like we can specify the bin directory, or we can say what's the URL to this plugin.
Yeah, because today the assumption is it must be a locally available executable. Yeah.
So yeah, I have it right here. So we have on the spec, on the verifier, we have name, artifact type, address, and parameters. Are we good with the names? Any suggestion on like new properties to add?
So if we have like a key vault reference, what would that be?
Yeah, so that'll be under the parameters for the individual verifier. I have a notary example right here. So this sample object, currently the notary configuration reads from a local path because we do mount the certificate, and the verification certificate is the input parameter. But once we kind of wrap around the CSI driver, it'll be the key vault information.
So I thought we were going to have kind of a connection between, so we'll have a CRD for the store and then a CRD for the verifier, right? So then I think when you want a reference for the verifier to where the CRD for the store is, so you don't have to put all that in.
When you say
so like this would reference just, let's say, the CRD, and then all the details of the key vault, the path, certs, all that stuff would be separate in there.
So just to clarify, so today these exist as the CSI driver, secret store, CRD. And we wanted to define the verifier and the validation certificate in one CRD. So then for the verification process, like the user have one set of one single place to define all the properties. Is that what we agreed on?
Well, so okay, and so maybe I thought that we were gonna like create another. I knew we were gonna use the CRD for the CSI, but I thought we were gonna wrap that into our custom CRD. So it's like a CRD wrapped in a CRD
Yeah.
type of thing. So then you'd be referencing our own, Ratify Days Labs Alpha 1 kind store or whatever we want to call it. And then you would put that in here, right? For the verifier.
Yeah, so this is the verifier CRD. And instead of having the CSI driver properties, which is these key vault names and object name in a different definition, we've kind of just put it in with this one verifier CRD.
So, but David, your question is, if we had another CRD that had all of this, had essentially all of the key vault references, and then we referenced that here. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because then you just, each CRD that has a store is a particular set of certificates, right, that are managed and operated independently, right? So that this verifier doesn't have to keep getting updated every single time you have different certificate changes, right? So here would be like, I just instead of key vault name and objects and tenant client, you just say, I want just the, my key vault CRD, and you reference that. And then that has all this data in it.
I see. So it's similar to how we have it today. These key vault properties will be defined in a separate CRD, which today is the secret store driver CRD. And this verifier CR would reference it in some way. And today the connection is by the mounting path, that this verifier knows to go to this disk location to load the certificate. But we're saying maybe we want we don't want to see the mounting path. We want to see a reference to the secret store CRD.
Yeah, and I think that users shouldn't really necessarily need to care about where this, the CRD should abstract where the certs need to live on the directory and all that, right? Like what your mapping would be is correlating whatever certs are dumped in the store, right, CRD, to however that particular verifier needs to work with whatever the directory structure, whatever it is, right? You just handle that behind the scenes. And so what I would expect in the verifier is any configuration for the verifier itself, right? Like obviously the cert part is like, we're abstracting that into the store. But if there were any other factors, like if there are any other factors, so for instance, in your S or license checker run, right? Like there, it makes sense to add the text of the license thing because that configures it, right? But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused because I always thought the verification certificate is more of a verifier configuration because you're saying I'm using this public cert to validate this image.
Right.
And it doesn't have any association with the store today. The store is for where are my artifacts? How do I fetch my artifact? It doesn't, it doesn't have association to the validation certificate today.
Right. So that's where you would, that's what I'm saying. So the verifier would associate the store certificates there, right? So the configuration of the store is some set of certificates. It could be for notation, it could be for cosign. Like you have to do some level of probably checking in the CRD to make sure that the CRD for the store is has the right kind of stuff in it, right? Like, I don't know, we'd have to think about how you do that, but like I just think that we want the certificate key vault integration, all just that whole management being totally in there, right? Whereas verifier in his peers form should be literally just things that correlate. And in this case, certificates would be the one thing. I don't think, down the road, if we ever had policy configurations and things like that, you'd probably put policy stuff in here. Right. But yeah, I mean,
and just to make sure, I understand when you're saying store, you're not meaning what we call refer store. You are just meaning that there should be another type of CRD that handles certificate mounting. Is that the way you
yeah. So you
okay.
Yeah, so you would have this like CRD that has effectively what you have here minus the user local ratify search thing, because that's really specific to ratify, right? But you would have a key vault name, you'd have a directory. Remember we talked about having like a directory of certs being automated if you added stuff into there, right? There's other things we could do with that, but and then the auto rotation of the certificates, all those things are stored in one like CRD for, it happens to be used for notation, right? Like, cool.
Got it. Okay.
And then that way, all that information could be updated independently, and you never have to touch the verifier unless, let's say, you need to, for that verifier, you need to change the set of like a whole nother set of certificate configuration, then you would, but you would leave it as probably just like, here's my core set of my core CRD that has certificates that may change, make it updated, whatever, and my verifier is like pretty much done.
So I don't think, besides the path, and if we set aside the default path for now and we say that we own that internally, then there is no configuration for notary. Like you would just put this and there'd be nothing.
Yeah,
and then,
the only thing you would put though is which CRD you would connect it to, right? Which for the certs, which CRD for the certs you connected to.
Yeah, I mean, we could just, I don't think we'd want to leave that open-ended. Like we would just internally, like you would just tell people or put in documentation, here's the CRDs we have, if this type of CRD, if you want, let's say it's called certificate store, or certificate source, this is a place where certs can come from. And you say, if you turn on notary, then any CRD that you make that's certificate source is going to end up in the notary trust store. So
or you could make it, or you could make it as a default value or something, right? Because we know that, like, you may have different certificates or different types of artifacts you want to integrate into Key Vault or other mechanisms or store, right? Store could be different things, right? For cosign, it's, you might use a different set of certificates or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think just maybe all you do is a simple value or something. I mean, as an idea, right?
Right.
Like it could just be like it could be let's say kind is store, and you have a value in there on the store saying like which verifier or verifiers do you want to allow for this type of store, right? And then you could do a basic check there to make life easier, right? And if they've done it wrong, then you dump some error or something, right? But otherwise, yeah, I mean, otherwise if you're saying every single store is used for notation, I feel like then you're kind of limiting yourself from expanding, right?
Yeah, it just it could get complicated. I mean, yeah, we essentially, from a CRD perspective, that might make sense, but like internally, we're going to have to represent like this structure within Ratify, so that structure doesn't exist at all today. So
Yeah,
like there's just assumptions and file paths. So yeah, it could, like, we could introduce this like meta store that can provide like arbitrary artifacts to verifiers that they may be interested in. Yeah, we'd probably have to think about what that would look like, because that,
yeah. I mean, this, what you're doing here is kind of, it feels like almost kind of what my original proposal is, because you're basically binding a verifier CRD with the actual storage information, right? It's kind of, it's a merged one. Even though you are using the CRDs under the hood, you're still combining one verifier CRD also merges in the actual storage certificate info together. And that's fine.
So today we don't have, we can, like Eric was saying, that this can be a default path. We don't have to see this at all. So the resource can just look like this. This is the name, this is artifact type. And the CSI driver CRD continues to, just as a step one, right? Like continues to be where you would specify the key vault information.
yeah, that would be,
So as a
you'd be
phase
able to,
one, we just will have the store for the artifact, like how to authenticate to the referrer store, and then the verifier resource. Would that be an okay initial experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think just having the verifiers, I mean, as a CRD is still is useful, right? Because you're getting the config out of a config file,
Yep.
and so that's great. I think though the changes, like from a user perspective, changes to the actual verifiers themselves are probably not going to be like super frequent, you know. Whereas changes to the certificates being used is the main use case we were trying to think about in our heads, right? Of like, how do we make that easier? So you're kind of not really necessarily hitting the main use case with the verifier CRD versus the store one, right? Unless you do what you're talking about, where you're actually kind of combining the certificate in with the verifier, and now you're updating the verifier every single time you want to change certificates, right? And so that, it's, yeah. Does that make sense?
but I mean, that makes sense to me, just mainly from the perspective of like having, like, let's say multiple teams that have different certificates that they want to use. Having them all have to have a merged representation of the verifier would be, like, verifier CRD would be more difficult for them. Whereas if every team could own, you know, just their slice, which is my certificates are like, I have my own CRD that tell them, here's my key vault, here's the path under the root of the trust store that they should go in, then that's probably easier. Like a multi-tenancy perspective.
Yeah, exactly. You could have the notation CRD and verifier, and then you could have that, like, that config point to different, you know, certificate locations for different instances of the cluster or different namespaces. And it's just a question of, do you want to do that in the way you have it, which is where you're putting it kind of inside the verifier, or do we want to like create another CRD that kind of wraps the CSI store driver thing, right? Because I think that the thing is in my mind, right, an ideal experience would be like if we just we let the key vault location where we trust the certificates be that's locked down, and that just gets updated. Like either the certs get rotated, certs get added and get removed, and we're going to allow that being the trusted authority of source, right? And then Ratify just, once it's configured, wants to point to that core directory in Azure Key Vault. It just works, right? The certs get rotated. You don't have to keep updating the config for the CRD, whatever it is on the cluster, right? It's like it looks for that directory in Key Vault, and it just automatically syncs and updates, right? So Ratify just naturally works without having to do Kubernetes changes. That's the end goal in my mind.
I think that seems like it makes sense. I think that experience is point in favor of us implementing our own custom key vault logic, because I don't think any of the drivers by default will walk the key vault. So if the idea was they'd have a key vault where everything lives, and we would, just essentially replicate the key vault's public keys on disk, like I don't think think you can do that with whatever exists. So
right. That was what Susan filed. There's some issue on that, and doesn't look like that's going to happen. So yeah, I mean,
we don't have an issue tracking. Like we did talk about writing our own key vault logic, but I don't think we created a tracking item. I will go create one, and then that would be a separate item to creating the CRDs.
Yeah, there is one. I have to pull it up, but I remember you had one on pointing to it relates to the keys auto updating.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I'm not. I have to look at it. There may not be one in terms of doing like enumerating all the certs in the root of the directory. I remember seeing an issue on that.
Yeah, the watching of the files on disk, like in the rotation scenario today, we use the CSI driver. If you rotated the key vault, the CSI driver would sync the change to the disk location that we specified in the deployment spec. And if we watched for changes in that directory, like today, the notary configuration is just the artifact type and the location to load the public validation certificate from. And if there's changes in that directory, we're not reloading the verifier. So if we had a watcher on that path, the end-to-end will function. It'll be that someone rotated the key vault certificate, and our file watcher got a notification, and we will recreate the notary verifier, and we're good. Like there's no reload of no touching the configuration for notary.
Yeah, for the certificate rotation, if you had that file watcher on the
correct. And that is the issue that I created.
Yep.
But it's still CSI driver doing the work.
Right.
We want a different item we will implement our own key vault logic to do all the enumerations, and because like we talked about previously, the limitations of the CSI store driver, that we might want to implement the key vault fetching logic ourselves when we have the resources.
Yeah. I think that'll make life a lot easier too, because the experience we're trying to strive for, right, for more streamlined, is, I think that's a big part of it, right? Because if every single time there's a change, you don't want to have to every single time update, add a cert in there every time, right? So that's kind of the thing we're trying to slipstream.
Yeah, we had a long discussion. I just want to check with Jimmy if he have any any thoughts on our discussion.
So what? I'm sorry, I was kind of like double doing things here.
That's okay. Yeah, I know you've been on. I know we're out over time, and I know you've been on the call. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss, or did you have any feedback on anything we've been talking about?
No, I mean I'm way behind. I mean I've been out on parental leave for the last several weeks, and then I'm also getting over COVID. But so when I left, the things that I was looking at were along the lines of two things. One, can we get somehow some accounts to do the end-to-end testing? And then the other thing was, if we can't get those accounts, can I support the verification of new versions of the SDK as they become available and are picked up by Dependabot? And that's kind of the last thing I remembered that I was engaged with respect to this effort. So if there's something else that I'm on the hook for, please let me know. So I'm trying to gear back up into.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that those are both things that are still needed, and we're not there's nothing else that I think we have for you right now.
Okay.
I hope you feel better soon, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been interesting, to say the least.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So I had mentioned in the chat earlier today in this meeting about notation 4 coming out. That wasn't regarding the conversation that you all were having, as much as I was trying to figure out if that was where, because I was told internally that it was due out by that date and that they wanted me to do some testing. So that's
I mean the dates for shipping notation have been historically challenging. So I've been for months trying to propose a regular release cadence, and at least for now the notation client anyway has an automated weekly dev build, for what it's worth. But the main discussions around the notary space have been around RC1. But I know that there are a number of there are some different fixes that folks on your side wanted to get in, and we were like, hey, whatever, release when you need to release, So I'm a big fan of frequent releases. So
okay. Well,
yeah.
Speaking of that, then, do we have any update on what's going on with OCI then in general, and how it's, because that, when I left, there was a positioning discussion going on between Oris and OCI.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're definitely scoping and estimating the work right now. That's definitely in the works. The exact timing is still getting fleshed out, but there are some upstream PRs which seem like they're done, but they're not merged. So, and then also once they're merged, getting them implemented is another thing. So, but yeah, I mean, that's what, ORAS has always had the desire from the original thing to be integrated in with the Uber OCI spec. So that's the plan in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, the last ORAS call was yesterday. I believe they talked quite a bit about that. So you might want to listen to that recording if and when it's up there.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do we want to keep going on this topic? Jim, you feel free to drop.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think we're just wrapping up. I just want to confirm that this, what I'm showing on screen is what we want the initial version of the verifier, the notation verifier, to look like. Are we?
I think if we're planning to have another CRD that represents, whatever it is that we're going to use to represent where certs come from, then it makes sense. Then this seems reasonable, and it should work, at least for now, with our existing CSI driver implementation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing I would say, it feels like it needs one more field, which may be the name of the store CRD thing that it's linked to, right? And that's it.
I see. So it's like, for example, it's using the
kind, like if there was a
Yeah,
kind.
well, no, it wouldn't be a kind, it would be like the name, right? So like it would be like name,
see.
like store
let me bring
CRD
it up,
store
yeah.
name, like CRD store name or something like that. And then you like whatever that you'd create a CRD with that same name, and then that would connect it, right?
So let me bring it out. So for example, the
how does that get around the issue of having to update the same thing though? Because then you're just moving that somewhere else, right? Because everything is, the name has to be unique.
Right. Yep, that's right.
That's saying the like using this name. So that is the link.
I see. Okay, that's different than what I thought you were saying. I thought you were saying we would implement another kind, and maybe in both cases, what I was thinking and what you're proposing, we would have a new kind, but I thought we would link based on kind rather than name directly. So if you have more than, if you're going to make more than one, you have to come in and update this notary to verify our CRD anyways, because you have to add more names.
Yeah, well, so you would likely, I mean, the odds are, right, that you're going to update the cert list in that CRD thing, right? And for now, until we get until we would have that, enumerate everything in the Key Vault directory, yeah, that thing is going to get updated regularly, right? But it may be that like you have multiple verifiers use that same store, right? You could have that all use that same name. So you are going to do a new like CRD type, right? Ratify store or whatever we want to call it, right? And then that's going to have which Key Vault is it, which directory or certs that are there. That thing will get updated regularly, but then the verifier will just say, I'm going to reference the notary store name, whatever the name you want to call it, right? My company notary certs or whatever, right?
Okay.
So then the only thing where that gets complicated and where I would say we should just not support it is having one verify support multiple like store CRDs, right? Because that's a nightmare. That's like, no, like you want one store CRD, update that thing all you want, but the notation verifier is got one, it's allowed one input of whatever that store CRD thing is.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I don't necessarily see how that's that much different than storing the information here, because in either case, under the hood, we're rehydrating a verifier every time that changes, right?
Yep.
So like functionally, it makes no difference whether those parameters are here versus in another one that we go look at.
Yep. Yeah. So right. So you're right. And so what started all this whole thing off, right, was the two factors. One was the cert rotation, which we have an answer for with just using the file. If we did the file watcher thing, we can use the CSI CRD thing and we're good there. The only other one, right, which we just talked about, right, is the enumeration of Key Vault, which the only way that I think we could do that is by having our custom CRD for that, right? There's other ways of doing it, I guess, but like, I think that was the one that we were thinking to help try and make that experience better and you could do other kinds of logic too, right? You could like check, I don't know, other things of the certs or other, make sure certs match a certain structure or what the other stuff down the road if you had that logic wrapped around the store CRD thing, right?
Right.
I guess. But yeah, today you're right. Like if we're not doing any of that custom logic, we're not planning on it. You're right. Like just doing the verifier and listing like the certs in this thing, then whatever, right? And just using it doesn't add any value. You're right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like in my mind, like how is this getting? So based on what you're saying, you envision, and maybe this is probably based on more user research than I've done, which is zero, but the intended case is that somebody puts all of the certs that they're going to use, the public portions at least, that they're going to use to sign things, they put that in one key vault, and the expectation is to enumerate the whole thing.
Yeah, for now,
So, like-
for now, you could just have to list every single cert in there, but yeah, eventually
okay.
to make it easier, that would be good.
Got it. Yeah, I guess I was thinking of a case where, like, let's say my team signs with a cert that's in my key vault and another team signs with the cert that's in their key vault. Then, you know, we might want those in the same cluster, in the same Ratify.
Yeah.
And in that, yeah, so in that case, maybe my key vault also has other stuff that I don't intend to add. So that was like,
yeah, well, yeah, you could have one key vault, right, and have different stores in the key vault, right, and that's normal. You have one team has one part of key vault over here, and another team has a different part of key vault over here, and then you would have those two two stores for the teams, and then the verifier would link to each one respectively, right? You could have one key vault, two locations of stores, right, and then the verifier would link to just that key vault location, right?
okay, maybe am I fundamentally misunderstood? Do I fundamentally misunderstand key vault? I use it mostly for secrets, but in, like, if you go to key vault, at least in Azure key vault, when you go there and you go to like the certs page, you get everything. I didn't know that there was like, if you have a single key vault, I didn't know you could partition underneath it.
I think you can't today. I think Shinko was saying
Okay.
that if you have access to, you can't just have access to one.
Like, yeah, having like
Okay.
one key vault is just a big, my understanding is one key vault for certs in a key vault, it's just a giant bucket. I don't think there's partitioning underneath that. So I think it's more, at least in my experience, it's more common to have many, many key vaults.
Yeah, I mean, that is more common for sure. You can, I mean, yeah, because typically people do it that way because it's easier. You have to set permissions to do it more granular. You have to set permissions to say certain certificates and things are only for certain people. But yeah, either way, for Ratify, I don't think it changes the design that I have in my mind. Right? Is your scenario if you have two teams that want to use a cluster that want to trust different certificates, they would have the two different, let's say, key vaults, two different store CRDs, and then that links to one, each different instances of the verifier that's there on the cluster, right?
Oh, I see. Okay. So in the one that you're thinking, so we might have multiple verifiers. We might have, you're saying you were envisioning multiple Notary V2 verifiers
that link to
have a one-to-one relationship with the store.
Yep.
Okay. So then we would need, oh, interesting. I guess that with some of the multi-tenancy things that we've talked about with namespacing, I guess that would make sense. You'd have to link these with a namespace, because then we'd need another pivot to be able to say, okay, now you've configured two verifiers, and are we just configuring two Notary verifiers and putting them in a list, and then we're going to run both of them? Or if we have two of them now, because today we only support one, so if we're adding two, then we would have to at the same time add that partitioning to be able to like pivot on the namespace or something.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that makes sense with what we've talked about from a forward-looking perspective. I was just thinking in like the context of what we do now, which I was like, oh, okay, got it. And then if we were doing that, then we would, I assume, be planning on going with Trust Store Lite, like, because if we're instantiating many copies of Notary V2, then we don't really care about Notary V2 Trust Store, because we're telling all the teams, you're going to pick the certificates that are used at the, for your verifier, for your Notary verifier. So Like,
yeah, and it does get tricky because, you know, you, like you said, the multiple, if you're running one instance of Ratify on the whole cluster, right, then you can't like reload this trust store thing every time. That's, I mean, I guess you could, but that gets really messy, right? Like you'd really want to have like some way to, like you said, partition or have a separate like instance of that running, or I don't know, but like you basically have to like, you know, it gets really, yeah, but that's where you want, if you want the multi-tenancy thing, that's where you got to start to think about that, right? Like there's some way that you want different certificates depending on when you execute it, right?
Yeah, so we would have to decide whether we were going to try to maintain one root of the one trust store root and translate like these multiple verifiers into like a combined, like a merged trust store, or whether we just want to maintain a trust store root per verifier, which would be much easier.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say the latter, because as trust store may change or update or whatever, you don't want to be in the business of trying to do this merge business in the code. That's like asking for a nightmare, right? Be better to just run an instance, different instances or whatever, right?
Yeah, and especially because maybe someday in the distant future, we'll come up with a way to let people kind of arrange their trust store. Like at least initially, if we're going to do it this way, then I'm like, okay, when people put stuff into the key vault, you know, it's just going to all be like trust store root, star, and that's everything that's in that key vault. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And then you just, whatever you want it to trust, you just put in that one place in key vault, and eventually, right, you don't have to, you know, if we get it to enumerate everything in there, it'll just, that'll be your trust store. That's it, right? Yeah, and then the policy stuff could come in the verifier, I think, if we wanted, because it's at least all just JSON, I believe, off the top of my head. So.
Yeah. Either from that perspective, we'd still have to do what Akash is talking about when come up with our own method of plumbing stuff in, but you know, it's doable. So
yeah.
Okay.
So sorry. Does that?
So we had a
Susan?
big discussion on this reference. So are we saying this adds value or it's not needed?
If we are going to have allow multiple instantiations of a single type of verifier, and in Notary's case, then this would be needed, because in Notary's case, we would have a one-to-many relationship between one of these or a one-to-one relationship between one of these instantiations and whatever we're going to our new CRD that represents where certs come from.
Yeah. So given today we're still using like in phase 1, we're just planning for the verifier CRD and the referrer store CRD. My thinking is we don't need this for now, but when we bring in the trust store CRD, we can then add this extra link.
Yes, and the last thing I would say about that approach is, from an ergonomics perspective, we should figure out what this is going to do when you Helm apply it, because we're now creating our own flavor of this dependency between manifests that Helm is not going to be able to track, and so you won't be able to Helm install this.
Oh,
but you'll have to, you'll have a dependency thing, right? Because you'll have to make sure that the CRD class is installed first before you try and apply it.
Right.
So that's not a new problem, right? I mean, there's I'm sure a way to make that, that work.
It's particularly that's true. I mean, so Gatekeeper has the same issue, right? Where constraint templates must be applied before constraints. And the way that they solve it is kind of nasty. They have a post-install Helm step that runs their own container that itself runs just shell stuff to apply templates. So it's pretty hacky. It's possible. It's very hacky. So.
Yeah. I hear you. It's it's not ideal, but I think, you know, again, we're just trying to think about the long-term tail of this. So I think the first demo install setup is one thing, and that's also obviously important for other factors, but yeah, I think getting people to be able to just look at this and edit, right? The multi-tenancy thing, the ease of edit. There's a number of factors why we're going down this CRD path, right? I think the store is the bigger one for the configuration side of things, but still, even like if you look at what you have in the license checker, right? I think that's a cool like experience, right? To just type in MIT or whatever, and you can update it, right?
Yeah, this one is simple, so it's very nice. It's clean.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I will continue working on the CRDs. Like I'll define the referrer store CRD next, and then I'll try to integrate it with the executor. So I'll just continue with that exploration.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. I will talk to everyone next week. Thanks for joining and take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.